Hey everyone, it's Justine, and today I'm celebrating the brand new release from My Favorite Things, and I am going to be using the Party Animals stamp set here. It has such an adorable little cow and this little chicken here that I wanted to use on a card, and I'm going to be starting off with my background today. So I grabbed this concentric circle background stencil from My Favorite Things, as well as a couple of distress inks. I'm going to be using some worn lipstick as well as spice marmalade and wild honey. So it's really cool because it has already in the center a very large plastic piece. I always like to go with my distress inks and start off the paper and work my way on it. So having this centerpiece here really helps. So I'm just going to be adding the stencil here, and I'm not going to go all the way to the edges or all the way out. I'm going to try and stop as randomly as I can to sort of get a burst of color in the center top of the cardstock. So once I am all finished with adding the colors here, I'm just going to remove my stencil from the paper. You can see that I secured it down with some washi tape when I originally started, and I have my center piece now all ready to go. So all I need to do is go ahead and add in the rest of the details for my card. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do some stamping. So I'm grabbing my Mini Misty stamping tool here, and I'm going to be adding in some of the stamps that I want to use. As I said, specifically, I'm going to be using the chicken as well as the cow. I think these are just absolutely adorable, and I can't wait to pair them up with a fun sentiment. So I'm just going to lay them onto my cardstock here, and I'm going to be stamping them in a Copic friendly ink. So that I'm able to Copic color with an alcohol marker in order to be able to do that. So I'm using some Memento ink here and just stamping those onto my cardstock. So you can actually stamp a couple of times if you don't like the way that they stamp the first time. So if you feel like they need to be a little bit darker, the Misty will allow you to be able to stamp them twice. Okay, so now comes the fun part where we start to color. So Copic coloring. Coloring is not the strongest point that I have, but I have been learning it over and over and practicing, and it's lots of fun. And so I'm just going to go in with some Copic markers, and oftentimes I like to work on a full card background here so that I can mix and match some colors to kind of see if they contrast with each other. So for example, by doing this, I was able to see that the first two colors I wanted to use are actually very close to the same shade. So probably not the best to get the coolest blend. So as I've said many times in my videos, my general strategy when I'm Copic coloring is that I'm going to be covering the entire area that I want to color in the lightest color. So for instance here, this is going to be my lightest shade of yellow. And then I'm going to go ahead and go in with my darkest and do any sort of cast shadows, followed by my medium color to blend it out, and then the lightest color again all over to blend out and make sure the colors are all nicely blended together. So I'm just going to repeat that general idea all over the card using various shades. So for the cow, for example, I'm going to be using a few different shades of gray. So I used N4, N6, and 8. I get asked a lot of the times why I don't just use black, and the reason why is because if I were to use black, you would never be able to see the detailed lines of the actual stamp, and it washes it out completely, and having no shading gives it no depth. So I actually very rarely use my black Copic marker. It's not really necessary at all. So I'm just going in with some colors, and I'm trying to keep the color palette quite similar. So for example, I had red on my chicken. I'm going to add a little bit of red to the cow on its collar here. And then I wanted to add a little bit of a contrast in the nose as well by adding some of the W grays. So I tried to keep some yellows and oranges. It's very similar to the stenciling that I just did in order to make sure that that stays consistent. And then I added some coordinating dies to the stamps here. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of the screen. And then I'm just going to go ahead and die cut those. And as you can see, I held those all in place with some washi tape because overall that just helps them from slipping and sliding within the big shot when I start to cut it. Okay, so now I'm just going to move on to attaching everything to my background, adding some sentiments, and adding the final touches to my cards. So I attached the critters here using some 3D foam tape. I'm not going to push too hard on them at the moment to get them in place because I do want to move my sentiment afterwards. I realized I wanted the sentiment to kind of go underneath the chicken a little bit. So I went ahead and I added my sentiment stamp. I grabbed my Misty tool again, and I'm going to add one of the sentiments. The sentiments are absolutely adorable on this Party Animal stamp set. And I decided to use here, let's pretend it's not past your birthday. I thought that was such a cute little pun. I love pun stamps. And I thought that would be super fun to add to the card. So I'm stamping this onto a piece of scrap cardstock. I really like to use up my scraps, so I always am looking for areas where I could stamp small things and cut them out so that I don't have any waste. So I'm just going to cut that out into a small rectangle here. I'm just going to trim everything down using my paper trimmer, and then I'm just going to add this to the front of my card. So now it's got this perfect, let's pretend it's past your birthday, and then I decided to lift up the chicken a little bit here so I can move him so I had enough room for my sentiment. So I just removed the 3D foam tape from the back of it, and then I just twisted the stamp a little bit here so that it was on the sentiment and kind of just super fun the way that it looks. So the final step here was to just add it onto a card base. It measures 11 by 4 1/4 and folded in half at 5 1/2 inches. And I'm just adding my card panel, which measures 4 by 5 1/4 inches, so you get that nice white frame on the outside. I'm going to add that to the front of my card now, and that'll be the end of my card video tutorial. I so hope you enjoyed today's card video tutorial. I hope you check out the new release for My Favorite Things. I have a bunch of them previewed on my blog so that you can see what the new stamps and things are. So be sure to go check that out. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and you have yourselves a great day.